An administrative desk. No military insignia, no uniform, just stacks of thick paper. Classified reports from the Third Reich. The rustle of a page turning is the only sound. This desk is the center of command for Ilse Koch at Buchenwald. Analysis of state archives reveals a structural anomaly. Her name appears with high frequency, not as a combatant, but as an administrative phenomenon within the system. A civilian integrated into a military apparatus. Her signature sits on official orders, next to the signatures of uniformed SS officers. This contradicts the rigidly codified hierarchy of the Schutzstaffel, where every position, every function had a specific rank and numeric designation. Ilse Koch held authority outside this structure, a parallel power. Her directives were processed as legitimate commands. The system accepted her civilian status as a functional equivalent to an officer's rank. Her administrative influence was absolute. She operated as an integral part of the camp's command chain. This integration was not informal. It was a documented procedural reality. Yet, in all official personnel files of the Third Reich, Ilse Koch possessed no military title. This unofficial authority required a formal mechanism. The SS provided it in August 1937 at Sachsenhausen. There, the Kochs began to operate as a single administrative unit, a tandem. Karl Koch monopolized strategic command, military decisions, major disciplinary actions. These were his domain. Ilse Koch controlled the operational sphere. This division of labor mirrored the structure of an industrial corporation, where strategic oversight is deliberately separated from day-to-day execution. The model maximized control over every camp function, from prisoner classifications to the procurement of supplies. Karl made the strategic choices. Ilse executed them on the ground. The administrative tandem had finalized its division of labor. The efficiency of this new administrative tandem was not just functional, it was architectural, built into the very design of their next assignment, the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. How does architecture neutralize resistance? Through total visual control. The camp was a physical application of Jeremy Bentham's panopticon theory, a single observation tower at the geometric center, a perimeter of cell blocks radiating outwards. From one vantage point, a guard could observe every prisoner without being seen. Total submission, engineered into steel and concrete. This model camp was the work of SS architect Bernhard Kuiper. He designed the barracks not as rectangles, but as equilateral triangles. Each one faced the central tower A. The layout eliminated blind spots and optimized the fields of fire for the machine guns. It was a sterile geometry of control. For the prisoners, it created a state of conscious and permanent visibility. This visibility was the ultimate trap. The system's logic was absolute. It required no walls between barracks, only wire fences. It minimized the number of guards needed for surveillance. Ilse Koch entered this machine not as a guard, but as an administrator, learning its bureaucratic procedures. The project was conceived in July. The year was 1936. A facility of this new model required a specific administrator. A manager for the system Heinrich Himmler was meticulously designing. The candidate was Karl Otto Koch. His administrative profile was built on a single principle: calculated terror. His previous experience was as a prison official in Leipzig. The penitentiary system there served as a testing ground, a laboratory for control methods later standardized throughout the camp network. Koch's capacity to maintain absolute order impressed his SS superiors. His record included convictions for fraud. Yet his SS career advanced with exceptional speed. His first marriage had dissolved over ideological conflict. His ex-wife rejected his extreme political convictions, requesting a divorce as he ascended the SS hierarchy. The experience was formative. He now required total alignment. An SS officer's search for a partner was not a private matter. It was an institutional process, governed by protocol. The foundation was not affection. It was biological and ideological certification. The process began with documents, genealogical charts tracing lineages back for generations, Proof of immaculate Aryan ancestry was required for both Karl Cook and his intended bride. Every submission was routed to a specific department, the SS Race and Settlement Main Office. Russia. This office was the gatekeeper of the new elite, processing thousands of applications to biologically engineer a master race. The paper file was only the first stage. Next were exhaustive medical examinations. Physical measurements were recorded. Hereditary histories were scrutinized. Ideological evaluations followed, designed to confirm absolute loyalty. The SS required that any offspring meet its stringent racial and political standards. Ilse Koch passed every test. The review was complete. The file was approved. In 1936, the Russia officially granted the matrimonial authorization. The matrimonial authorization of 1936 was not a product of chance. It resulted from a status secured 2 years prior, a calculated investment in the new political order. After January 1933, German democratic institutions were systematically dismantled. What did early party membership provide in this new state? Direct access to material privileges and administrative positions. The transformation of the state apparatus was swift. The 1933 law for the restoration of the professional civil service purged thousands, creating vacancies that only loyalists could fill. In Dresden, her role shifted. She was no longer a simple typist. She was a party militant with access to internal power circles. This proximity granted her connections to several SS officers stationed in the region. These relationships were transactional, offering entry into the core of the new state. By 1934, her position within the local party structure was consolidated. A consolidated party position was a key. It unlocked access to the regime's inner circles. Entry was structured through official channels. The NSDAP's Women's Auxiliaries, the League of German Girls, the NS Frauenschaft. These were not social organizations. They were instruments for ideological integration, funnels to the elite, and the elite was the SS. Membership required passing a severe ideological and biological filter. Lists detailed requirements of racial purity, absolute loyalty, and doctrinal fanaticism. This was the core Heinrich Himmler was building. The SS was not a conventional military force. Himmler engineered it to function more like a religious, ideological order. It positioned itself as the racial vanguard of the German people. This was not an army. This was an order. Entry into this ideological structure required a formal act of commitment. In 1932, Ilse Koch joined the National Socialist Party. Her party book was issued, a small document of coarse, utilitarian cardboard. Registration was logged in party archives before the seizure of power. This was not a choice of political convenience. It was an ideological investment. The context is numerical. In 1932, total NSDAP membership stood at approximately 800,000. Ilse Koch's membership number was just under 500,000. This placed her statistically among the early adherents, joining 3 years after the Wall Street crash of 1929. An economic collapse that systematically dismantled the Weimar Republic. Her commitment was permanent. Her official party number, 497,999. The ideological choice of 1932 was not abstract. It was a direct consequence of the Weimar Republic's financial collapse. The year was 1923. The nation's currency disintegrated. By November, $1 cost 4.2 trillion paper marks. This hyperinflation mathematically liquidated the German middle class and its savings. Faith in parliamentary democracy eroded. Ilse Koch was 17. Her education was practical, not academic. She attended a commercial school in Dresden. The curriculum was specific: accounting, typing, shorthand. It was vocational training for low-level administrative positions. Her first jobs followed this trajectory: a cigarette factory, secretarial work. The administrative protocols learned in a Dresden office would later be applied to the management of a camp. These roles provided a unique education. she learned that effective authority did not require supreme rank. It required knowledge of internal processes. From her desk, she observed how superiors managed subordinates and allocated resources. The financial collapse of the Weimar Republic was not an isolated event. It was a consequence, a delayed reaction to the total depletion of the German state during the First World War. While a young student learned geography in a classroom, the war was actively redrawing the map of Europe. Not with ink, with artillery shells. The lessons described a stable imperial order. The reality was its violent disintegration in the trenches. The conflict consumed national resources, men, steel, food. On the home front, rations became the primary metric of survival, with the smell of thin soup and ersatz bread filling civilian kitchens. The state apparatus, built for peace, was repurposed for total war. It could not sustain the load. The system began to fail, marked by events like the turnip winter, a direct result of agricultural and logistical collapse. The structure was hollowed out. The capitulation was not simply a military defeat. It was a systemic failure of an exhausted nation. 1918. Before its terminal collapse, the German Empire operated on a system of predictable social replication. In September 1906, a child was born into this framework. Margarita Ilse Koch. The location was Dresden, a major industrial center in the Kingdom of Saxony. Its cobblestone streets and factories represented a world of rigid order. What was the designated role for this child? The system provided a clear answer: an effective wife within a strict patriarchal hierarchy. Her father was a foreman, a component of the empire's industrial backbone. He was disciplined, loyal to the established order, and excluded from political power. Her mother enforced the societal programming. Domestic obedience was mandatory. Patriarchal submission was the norm. This was the structure for girls of their class. It was not a unique family dynamic. It was sociological engineering on a national scale. A process designed to produce compliant citizens for a stable state. The goal was singular. The path was non-negotiable. Preparation for marriage was the sole defined social function. Post-liberation audits of Buchenwald in 1945 documented specific manufactured goods. Desk lamps with shades of human skin. The material was translucent enough to show the black ink of tattoos on the whitish surface. Book covers were bound with fragments where Gothic lettering remained legible. Complete tattoos were extracted and framed, cataloged as small ornamental objects. This was not random brutality. It was a production process, one governed by strict technical specifications. Prisoners with bookbinding skills received direct orders. The work demanded absolute precision, invisible seams, exact cuts. The testimony of Joseph Ackerman, assigned to skin treatment, confirms this protocol. He received specific directives on sewing techniques and the required thickness of the finished leather. The inventory system itself was a direct copy of civilian industry. Tattoos were cataloged by theme, color, and anatomical zone, a method identical to German textile warehouse standards. The air in the processing area carried the specific odor of preserving chemicals and moisturizing oils. Another prisoner, Gustav Wagner, corroborated the system. He reported seeing these lamps in the offices of the camp's medical block. Between 1943 and 1945, Ackerman testified to working on at least 20 different human skin fragments. All were sourced from recent corpses. The final stage was maintenance, a standardized procedure. Inmates were required to polish the finished items with moistened linen cloths to preserve the surface luster. The source material was human skin. Its procurement process originated during routine sanitary inspections. During these examinations, specific body markings were identified. Northern sailors displayed anchors. Criminal elements showed Gothic script. Political prisoners carried ideological figures. This visual richness became an involuntary catalog. Where did such a diversity of raw material come from? The Buchenwald camp concentrated inmates from across Europe. This created an unintentional visual archive. The demographic composition produced a statistical anomaly. Buchenwald had a higher concentration of complex tattoos compared to other camps. A simple observation during medical checks evolved into a systematic protocol. The initial curiosity became a directive. An order was given to the guards to report any unusual skin markings. To transition from informal selection to official protocol, a pseudoscientific basis was required. SS Dr. Erich Wagner provided it. He promoted a theory. Tattoos were indicators of criminal predisposition or racial degeneration. The concepts echoed 19th-century criminological theories by Cesare Lombroso, now adapted for Nazi racial doctrine. Wagner argued a direct correlation between body art and deviant mental structures. Any aesthetic deviation was classified as an expression of genetic corruption. Under this justification, the collection of tattooed skin could be presented as medical research. Anatomical criteria replaced aesthetic value. The selection process became systematic. Large, well-preserved specimens were prioritized. The preferred locations were the back, chest, and thighs. These areas facilitated easier extraction. Small tattoos were rejected. Skin deteriorated by scars or infections was also excluded. The quality of the material was paramount. The project was filed as an anatomical study. The anatomical study required a clinical protocol. This algorithm was the work of the camp's chief physician, SS Hauptsturmfuhrer Waldemar Hoven. Hoven was a specialist in euthanasia techniques. His expertise was refined during Action T4, a program for the mass murder of disabled citizens that served as a technical laboratory for the camps. He perfected quiet liquidation methods. The primary tool was phenol. A direct injection of phenol into the heart had a 100% mortality rate. The protocol was a precise, multi-stage process. Selected prisoners were transferred to the hospital block. The official reason: medical analysis. First, sedation. Then, the injection. A syringe filled with carbolic acid. The needle inserted between the ribs. The plunger depressed. The body was then moved to the pathology department. Inside, the air was sharp with the smell of formalin and preserving salts. The second phase began: extraction. Wide surgical incisions were made around the tattooed area. The design was to be kept whole. The skin was peeled back from muscle and fat. Then the material was submerged in chemical solutions to ensure structural integrity. It was stretched taut on wooden frames. It was left to cure under controlled humidity. The full drying process lasted up to 3 weeks. The finished artifacts required a stable, climate-controlled environment. That environment was the Commandant's new villa. Its interior contained Viennese furniture and a kitchen equipped with the latest Siemens appliances. Central heating maintained a constant temperature. The floors were covered with imported carpets. The residence was designed in the Heimatstyle. This style required pronounced roofs and complex carved dark wooden frames. It demanded specialized stonework and joinery. The labor force, drawn from the camp, possessed neither the specialized skills nor the physical capacity for such precision. Prisoners transported stone and wood by hand. Their tools were rudimentary. Workdays ran from dawn until dusk. Foundations were excavated manually from rocky terrain. Underneath, a private air raid shelter was dug. Dozens of prisoners died from exhaustion, infection, and hypothermia during the construction. This cost was ignored. The glazed ceramic bathrooms were supplied with constant, uninterrupted hot water. The engineering of control was not confined to the villa's structure. It extended outward. It subordinated the surrounding landscape. Forced floriculturists maintained the grounds under strict protocol. These prisoners were tasked with creating a perfect garden. Geometric planting patterns were mandatory, even during winter months. Fountains were cleaned twice daily. The protocol demanded that grass be cut with manual shears to achieve perfect symmetry. The aesthetic mandate was absolute. This was a form of pedagogical terror. The result? A severe visual dichotomy. Perfectly manicured rose beds stood in precise alignment. A few meters away, prisoners dragged emaciated bodies toward the crematoria. The proximity was not accidental. It was a mechanism. From her windows, Ilse Koch observed a controlled landscape, a microcosm of Third Reich ideology. The performance of power was a daily ritual. She favored Lipizzaner horses, known for their disciplined dressage movements. Her riding uniforms were tailored to measure. Each morning, Ilse Koch performed these exercises directly in front of the inmates. The maintenance of such an estate, alongside new capital projects, required autonomous financial sources. In 1940, this translated into a covered riding arena. Its cost was 250,000 Reichsmarks. This sum was equivalent to the annual salary of 500 German industrial workers. How was a budget of 250,000 Reichsmarks funded? Through a systematic process of asset liquidation, laundered through accounts in Switzerland. The raw material came from prisoners. Their suitcases were opened and sorted. Valuables, currency, and jewelry were separated. Dental gold, extracted from corpses, was a primary source. These assets were then delivered to SS intermediaries operating out of Weimar and Leipzig. This laundered capital was converted into physical infrastructure. The construction of the riding arena was executed without mechanized assistance. The terrain was leveled by hand. Heavy structural components were lifted without cranes. Concrete was mixed and poured manually, the work punctuated by the hollow sound of shovels against wooden troughs. Prisoners worked in double shifts. Before being sold or deposited, all gold was melted into anonymous ingots. This process destroyed any hallmarks or engravings, erasing all traces of origin. Deaths from exhaustion and accidents during the construction were routine. The bodies were removed and the labor details adjusted. Official construction reports show 0 fatalities. While the villa's finances operated outside official Reich protocols, its supply chain did too. The war economy demanded rationing. The Koch residents ignored it. Ilse Koch personally selected each item for the interior, an exercise in symbolic power. Silt for curtains was imported from China. The library's collection of German classics was bound in Moroccan leather. On the walls, Germanic landscapes hung beside official portraits of Hitler. This luxury existed in a state of total scarcity. While inmates received a ration of 350 grams of black bread, the villa's table was supplied by a separate SS network. Karl Koch's position guaranteed access. They dined on Bavarian sausages, tropical fruits, and confiscated French wines. The interception of goods like Colombian coffee was a direct violation of the SS's own internal economic regulations. Part of these supplies came from diverted shipments. The rest was taken from the prisoners. The management of these luxury goods and imported technologies required a specialized workforce. This workforce, however, came at no financial cost. It included expert Italian gardeners, tasked with landscape aesthetics, who were then quartered in unsanitary conditions adjacent to the villa's cesspools. The domestic staff was composed exclusively of prisoners with exploitable professional histories. A Parisian chef deported for resistance activities. An Austrian butler with prior experience in aristocratic houses. What was the operational efficiency of this labor force? The workdays extended to 16 hours. There were no days off. The cost for labor was 0. At the end of a shift, personnel descended into the villa's unheated basement. The rooms had no windows. The air was cold. Physical depletion from the work schedule was severe, and the rations provided were insufficient to compensate for the constant exertion. This domestic structure was a micro-model of the concentration camp system. Total control, strict differentiation, constant surveillance. The hierarchy was reinforced by rigid protocol. Staff were required to address Ilse Koch as gnädige Frau, gracious lady. According to internal SS regulations, this formal address was legally abolished for prisoners. Its enforcement was an act of extra-legal personal subordination. A key tenet of this system was the prohibition against looking her in the eye when addressed. This concentration of labor was enabled by a unique administrative structure. Ilse Koch, a civilian, maintained direct correspondence with superior SS officers in Berlin. She operated outside the standard military chain of command, a severe breach of protocol. Their union functioned as a symbiotic power mechanism. Karl Koch provided the institutional framework and formal military authority. Ilse Koch supplied the administrative efficiency. This synergy transformed the camp's operational capacity, establishing a new precedent within the system. Her authority was not theoretical, it was absolute. Her power manifested in daily operational decisions. She personally managed the allocation of prisoners to specific work brigades. The foundation for this corrupt ecosystem was laid down in engineering schematics, a project approved in August 1937. Karl Otto Koch received the assignment. The location was strategic, the northern slope of Ettersberg Mountain. Its dense surrounding forests were a key geographical feature. They guaranteed near-total visual and acoustic isolation from the outside world. This was not a prison. This was a factory in the wilderness. The project's scope differed fundamentally from previous camps like Sachsenhausen. It was engineered as an autonomous industrial hub, designed to service the SS economy through the intensive exploitation of quarries and future workshops. The initial architectural plans and foundation layouts were calculated from the start to support a massive population. A network of barracks, utilities, and security infrastructure built for tens of thousands of prisoners. To execute this plan, Karl Otto Koch was transferred from his post at Sachsenhausen. He brought a cadre of experienced administrative personnel with him. This transfer ensured the new camp's logistical and bureaucratic systems were operational from inception. The new complex was named Buchenwald. Its initial planned capacity exceeded 50,000 inmates. The Reich collapsed. Its architects scattered. How does a key figure vanish? By becoming nobody. A war widow lost among refugees in Württemberg. Ilse Koch assumed a new identity using the documents of the dead. She moved through the chaos with her 3 children. An administrative camouflage, perfect anonymity. But a memory survived, a face from Buchenwald. On June 30th, 1945, American forces moved on a target in Ludwigsburg. A former prisoner made the identification. In the chaos of the filtration camp, her posture was a stark contrast. Arrogant, indignant, as if the arrest was a bureaucratic error, not a reckoning. American military tribunals convened in Dachau. Between 1945 and 1948, they prosecuted over 1,600 war criminals. It was the largest single judicial program in U.S. military history. On April 11, 1947, the Buchenwald case opened. 31 defendants stood before the court. Only one was a woman. The charges were formal: violation of the laws of war, participation in a common plan to commit crimes against humanity, systematic torture, premeditated murder. The proceedings lasted 4 months. More than 100 witnesses testified. Their accounts detailed selections, arbitrary punishments, and items made from human skin. The defense argued Ilse Koch lacked official authority, but the tribunal disagreed. On August 14, 1947, the verdict was delivered: guilty. The sentence was life imprisonment. A complication arose: Koch was pregnant. In October 1947, her son Uwe Kohler was born in the penitentiary. He was immediately removed by social services. Then came an unexpected legal turn. General Lucius D. Clay, military governor of the American Zone, reviewed the case. This was the same man who, 1 year later, would organize the Berlin airlift. Clay commuted the life sentence to just 4 years. The reason was procedural. He argued the evidence was primarily testimonial. There was insufficient physical proof. The decision provoked mass indignation across Europe and the United States. In response, West German authorities initiated a new case under their own jurisdiction. The legal argument for leniency rested on a lack of physical evidence, but the evidence existed. It was found and cataloged. In Buchenwald, April 1945, American troops inventoried the contents of the Commandant's villa. The exhibits were laid out: Gloves made from human skin, with the natural creases of the palms still visible. Glass jars holding preserved human ears. Sheets of tanned hide, some still bearing the ink of tattoos. The items were physical. They were undeniable. The documentation process was methodical. American war correspondents set up their cameras. The objects were arranged on desks for archival photography, cataloged one by one. Each finding generated a visual record, a file, a fact. These images were not solely for the trial. They were integrated into the materials of the U.S. Army's Psychological Warfare Division. The photographs were presented to German civilians as part of mandatory denazification programs. The visual record created an educational archive for future generations. The artifacts found in April 1945 were not random trophies. They were the output of a strict bureaucratic system. A paper trail documented each step. A requisition order was issued. The camp physician, Dr. Waldemar Hoven, signed it. A mechanical stamp on a form. The document moved forward. How does one legitimize the extraction of human skin? You label it the collection of didactic material, a study in biological degradation. This process required coordination between 3 separate camp departments: internal security, medical direction, the administration of confiscated property. 3 independent departments, all coordinating a single, documented murder. This was not a rogue operation. The SS Ahnenerbe Institute officially sponsored similar anatomical collections. It funded them across the Third Reich. The stated purpose was a contribution to racial knowledge. The body was now raw material. The hospital's entry and exit logs aligned with the dates on the requisitions. One entry disappeared from the barracks. A new object appeared in the inventory. The system was systematic, clinical, logistically viable. Crime became routine. The bureaucracy of violence was efficient, yet the internal SS investigation was not triggered by murder. It was triggered by finance. An audit of Buchenwald's administration uncovered a systemic corruption scheme. Official records were examined. Heavy accounting ledgers showed assets upon prisoner entry. The inventories of actual holdings showed something else. The difference was not minor. Assets valued at tens of thousands of Reichsmarks were missing. This was a direct violation of protocol. The SS Main Economic and Administrative Office, the WWII, stipulated all confiscated property belonged to the Reich. Private enrichment constituted a crime against the state. The investigation pivoted to Karl Koch's personal finances. His bank statements documented regular deposits far exceeding his official salary, a clear pattern of asset laundering. Funds were traced to transfers in Swiss banks. The mechanism was methodical. Confiscated valuables were channeled through intermediaries in Weimar and Leipzig. Dental gold was melted down. Jewelry and currency were sold on the black market. The proceeds were then laundered back into the Commandant's accounts. The investigation also identified Ilse Koch's direct participation. Documents proved she personally selected valuable articles. Testimonies confirmed she delivered goods to contacts outside the camp. Her involvement was structural. The final evidence was consolidated by August 1943. A private riding arena stood as the most flagrant monument to this illicit enrichment. Its financing did not originate from official funds. It came from the systematic liquidation of prisoner assets. The cost was 250,000 Reichsmarks. The investigation into that illegal wealth did not begin with financial ledgers. It started 2 years earlier, 1941, with a single name on a list of the camp's dead. The name was Walter Kramer. He was not just a prisoner number. He was a former political prisoner and a medical orderly, a man who had previously treated General Josias zu Waldeck-Pyrmont, the region's SS commander. His death was an administrative anomaly. Soon, another name raised suspicion: Karl Peeks, another medical assistant. Both were executed on the direct orders of Commandant Karl Koch. The official charge: sabotage. The real reason was medical, not procedural. Karl Koch had contracted syphilis. For the SS, a venereal disease was a critical breach of protocol. It violated Himmler's strict requirements for the absolute physical and genetic purity of his officer corps. Kramer and Peeks had treated Koch's condition. They were witnesses to a career-ending secret. Their execution was an unsanctioned act to guarantee silence, a procedural overreach. This was not about cruelty, it was about a breakdown in institutional control. An execution without a superior's order was a direct threat to the SS command structure. General Waldeck initiated a formal inquiry. He ordered a complete audit of the entire camp. The order for a complete camp audit mobilized the SS main office for judicial affairs. SS Oberfuhrer Konrad Morgan, a lawyer and judge, was assigned to the Buchenwald case. He arrived in August 1943 with a direct mandate from Heinrich Himmler to investigate systemic corruption. Morgan's methodology was forensic. He did not rely solely on testimony. He impounded financial ledgers and requisitioned internal documents. He ordered personal inspections of camp facilities. To verify suspicious medical reports, Morgan commanded exhumations of illegally executed prisoners. The graves were opened, the soil was turned. His team worked to match the physical evidence with the falsified records. This was not an isolated case. Morgan's mandate was broad, part of an internal effort to preserve the SS's public image of ideological purity. His office initiated proceedings against over 200 SS officers. A vast internal anti-corruption purge. Few investigations, however, concluded with definitive sentences. The case against Karl Koch became a high-profile exception. The evidence compiled by Morgan was absolute, detailing the embezzlement of over 200,000 Reichsmarks. It also included proof of extrajudicial killings. His investigation proved Karl Koch authorized at least 7 murders to silence witnesses. The evidence against Karl Koch was fatal, but for his wife, the SS legal system encountered a procedural wall. In December 1944, the SS tribunal delivered its verdict. Karl Koch was sentenced to death. Ilse Koch was acquitted of all major charges. Why was the Commandant's wife acquitted? The reason was a matter of legal mechanics. Without an official rank in the SS, she technically could not violate its code. She could not be court-martialed for institutional betrayal. The prosecution did prove she received stolen property. The total value exceeded 25,000 Reichsmarks. For this, she received a sentence of 16 months of preventive prison, a term she had already served by the time of the verdict. But for capital charges, the case collapsed. As a civilian wife, she had no formal authority to issue orders. For Karl Koch, there was no such ambiguity. His death sentence was personally ratified by Heinrich Himmler. For Himmler, Koch's crime was not murder, it was theft from the state. Personal enrichment threatened the SS economic monopoly. That was unforgivable. On April 5, 1945, the sentence was carried out inside Buchenwald. The sound of the volley echoed within the camp perimeter. An SS firing squad executed Karl Otto Koch, according to military protocol. Karl Koch's body was disposed of in an unmarked grave, a symbolic expulsion from the SS. This act demonstrates the Reich's judicial logic. Systemic murder was a functional process. Private enrichment was treason. The SS was more than a paramilitary organization. It was an economic conglomerate. The Schutzstaffel controlled over 150 corporate enterprises. Its entire economy depended on the systematic expropriation of assets from prisoners. Karl Koch's corruption was not just theft. It was a direct violation of the state's monopoly on plunder. An institutional failure. The Third Reich disintegrated less than a month later. The system that judged Koch ceased to exist. Amid the final collapse, his wife was set free. The Third Reich was gone. But the Federal Republic of Germany was not. In 1950, immediately following her release, West German authorities arrested Ilse Koch. A new trial began in November. The court convened in Augsburg, a new flag, a new legal code. From November 1950 to January 1951, the prosecution presented testimony from over 250 witnesses. The case was built on recovered documents and detailed accounts. On January 15, 1951, the German tribunal issued its verdict: life imprisonment. According to the Basic Law for the Federal Republic of Germany, or Grundgesetz, adopted in 1949, capital punishment had been abolished. This was the maximum sentence. The possibility of commutation was denied. Ilse Koch was transferred to the Eichach women's prison in Bavaria. Cold stone walls. She would spend the next 16 years there. Her mental state began a documented decline. Paranoia, instability. Penitentiary records note specific episodes of delusion. She claimed the ghosts of prisoners visited her cell. They demanded the return of their skin. The stigma became an unbearable burden. In 1967, her son Artwin committed suicide. His death accelerated her psychological deterioration. The final verdict documented 135 counts of incitement to murder. The final court ruling offered no closure. Her documented victims left no final statements. Ilse Koch would also depart in silence. In Eichach prison, her psychological state degraded. A documented aversion to leather became pathological. She refused contact with the material in any form. This was a documented extreme phobia. On September 1, 1967, guards found her body. Suicide by hanging. The ligature was improvised from state-issued bedsheets, twisted tight with methodical knots. No note was left. No explanation was provided. Her remains were buried in an unnamed grave. The plot itself was anonymous, located within the municipal cemetery. Its exact location is not a matter of public record.